All right, so I have my virtual environment, so I'm going to create a project, and this is obviously very simple, but it's going to be something like you have we'll have a profile, basically like a user profile, and then we'll have a blog post. So that'll be our models, and keep it simple. So Django admin start. Start app. Okay, so I've got my, is this big enough? So I got my project level, which I'm just calling project. And then I'm going to add the installed app here. So we've got blog posts. And then I'll go to the URLs. And I'm going to import include. And then we'll route this to blog. And this will refer to the blog posts URLs. Now we'll go over here and we'll create that URLs. And the path will just go nothing. And I think we'll end up having two routes, but this will be initially we'll just do the route to make a blog post, and then okay, and then I'll have to import that. All right, so create post, that's imported. So I'm gonna go to the views. And then I'm just gonna write some boilerplate to check if it's so this will be a form. So we'll do check for get request or post request. So if request that all right, so we're just gonna pass for right now. And let's go to our models. I'm jumping around a little bit. So first thing we'll do is we want to create a profile. So a profile and then a blog post. So class profile. And then here's where we're gonna include the user. So the Django has a built-in user model, which comes from the auth. Let me just see. Actually, I can look at that here. Virtual environment. Django, trib, auth.
Is a base user?
The base user manager. Let's see. Abstract base user. Okay, so I have to look around. There is a base, just a base user. I believe, which we'll end up using. But there is so Django has a built-in user model, and that inherits from a couple other things. So we can import that and use it, but it's obviously, it has its own default settings and way of doing things, and you may want to customize that or extend it or kind of maybe override it entirely. We're going to focus on extending the functionality. So not really modifying anything, but just adding stuff. So the first, and in some ways the simplest way to do this, is to create a one-to-one relationship between a user and the profile. Meaning that there's a user, so the built-in user model, which has a whole bunch of fields like username, password, permissions, and all kinds of other things. And then we have a profile, which would contain information about the user that isn't really about authentication and authorization. So things like, you know, favorite color or whatever, but whatever other like kind of application specific information that you have about a user. So you can store that in a profile. So you keep those two things separate. So we'll do it that way first. So from Django dot contrib dot auth models. So I'm importing user. So this is something that Django made for us. So I'll call this lowercase user, just a user. And that will be models dot one-to-one field. And we'll pass in user. And then on delete, you could do a couple different things. We'll just do this. Okay, so here we have a profile, and then we have this user. So a profile will have one user, and a user will have one profile. Then we can add some extra stuff like yeah, car field. And then okay, we have a user. I'm going to override the string method. So let me look quickly at the Django. Oops. So the user model, we can look at the documentation and see the fields. So there's a username, first name, last name, email, password, groups. So this is all of the fields or attributes that are on a user. So we'll take a look at username to represent that. So we can self that user.username. And I will do all right. So we have a profile, and we also want to have some blog posts. So class. And we will do author foreign key and attach that to user. And then on delete. Title. And then also override the string method. Actually, we'll just do sub.author. Okay, so I think that's probably good for the models. So here, again, just as a reminder, we're using the Django user model. We're not overwriting it. We're kind of taking it as is, but we're just attaching this kind of supplemental. I think it's like supplemental information for a user.
Chad, I have a question.
Sure.
Comparing line 5 to 13, you're using the one-to-one field versus foreign key. Is that because we have like the foreign key is already, wait, they're both using user though. So can you talk about the difference between one-to-one field versus foreign key?
Sure. So it would be nice in some ways if this were called one-to-many. So we have one-to-one, many-to-many, and then foreign key. So foreign key is basically one-to-many. So I didn't say it explicitly, but the idea would be that a given author could write lots of blog posts, but that a blog post only belongs to one author. And an author is just a user.
Thank you.
And then, Chad, I had a quick question too. You said we were just using user. Like, why did we have to create user equals models one-to-one on the user field under
Yeah.
profile?
So we can call this, thought about doing that. Let me just, in case that's confusing.
I guess I still don't understand why.
Well, sorry, would you mind asking your question one more time?
Yeah. So, like, why do we need, since we're using the user class, the user object, like, why do we need to create a user under profile, except that you need to specify that it's one-to-one with user? Is that the whole reason?
Yeah, so
Okay.
this might be easier if it were, so you could think of like a user, here's a user, and user has all of the, let's say, the really critical information from the perspective of authorization. So it's got the password and the username and the permissions, right? So that's like in some ways that's like application agnostic information. It's just any user will have to have a username and a password. Your particular application could be anything, right? So this is a way of keeping separate the kind of baseline information that any user would have basically in any application. And then the profile contains information about a user that is specific to your application. It could be their, their favorite time zone or their preferred background color or their payment plan. I mean, whatever kind of things that you want to attach to a user. That's not like, is this person allowed to sign in? Does this person have an account? Can this person view this resource?
I see. So basically, though, you need like, but basically my user in this case is basically like just telling the Django that we're going to use the class user.
It's telling Django that profile is going to be attached to one single user, and that one single user is going to be attached to one single profile. So you can think of it as just like, it's like a supplementary bucket where you can put stuff. So there's the user, like the real user bucket, and then there's a little string tied to this supplementary stuff bucket. But there's only one for each.
Because I guess I'm confused now, because then we have like my user, and then we have first name, last name, and username. Like, I guess, like, don't we already have user name, or like now we have two kind of users.
Uh, so a profile, this is a general pattern. Let me try to think of another way of.
Maybe I can ask my question back, maybe a clarity. So, because I'm not following, but I think I just understood what you're saying. So we talked about extending this user database that exists inside the Django. So we could like go in and actually edit it, but instead of doing that, we're creating a relationship table that we're going to add our own fields to. So we get all the user information that Django already stores for us, but we're going to add to it if we want to add like our favorite color, like you said. But it takes a lot more work to change the user database. So we just add to it this way and create that relationship.
Right. So
Is
my
that-
user is an ID basically, like a foreign key. My user is an ID and not like another username.
Yeah. So my user will be like a user instance or like an ID for a user. Yeah.
Okay, we can move on. I don't know that maybe I'm just not following, but I think I get it, but keep going.
Trying to think of a good analogy for
A
this.
username is an attribute. Username is an attribute of the instance of user
Right.
in 9.
Yes. So I got this this username attribute from this documentation. So the user model, the built-in user model that Django has a username attribute built in. So that's how I know that that's there. So my user is an instance of Django's built-in user. So that means that it has a username.
And we're kind of working on an order, right? Like, because next week we're going to talk about how you get a user in that database correctly. But this is already sort of jumping forward. Do you already have a user in the database correctly, and now you want to extend it?
Well, I mean, any model starts out presumably not having any instances.
Data.
Yeah, so we're not
Instances
gonna.
in it, yeah.
We'll next week we'll talk more thorough about how we actually want to create accounts and log in and log out and all that other stuff. This is in some ways an introduction to next week, but also just it's also about the fact that you can customize how Django does things for you. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going for now, and at the end, please save your questions, and I can go over them. I can also create a breakout room afterwards to go over some of this stuff. But for now, so we have a user here, we have our profile here, there's a one-to-one relationship, and then a user has one profile but could have lots of blog posts. Let's see where we are. So we have our models, the URLs, going to create a post. Okay, so here, okay, once we have the models, we're going to need a form. So let's make a form next. So create a forms.py to hold the forms. And I'm going to use the model form, Django's model form, which is kind of the easiest way to do this. So from Django.forms. And I'm going to create a class. I'll create two classes. One will be for the profile. So let's do profile form. And here it's we'll give it a meta class so you can supply the attributes that it needs. So class meta. And the first one is model. and that will be profile. Let's do from and then blog post. And then the fields, so these are the two required fields that you have. I'm going to do all, so you can specify them. You can also exclude ones. This is not recommended, but I'll just do it. So class, and then blog post. Model form. Blog post form. Yeah, it's fields. All right, so we'll start with that. So now we have these forms. So once we have the forms, we can go back to our views and we can use them. So if there's a post request, well, let's start with the get request. So there's a get request, the form, we'll create an empty form. I'm just gonna do this in one line. So return, render, request. And then this will be blog post /views.html. And then the context object, we'll call it form. And this will be we'll import that form. So from .forms import. Profile form. And this will be actually we'll do blog. Yeah. All right, so let's test this out for now before we get the post going. And so I'm going to do all my imports. So Python manage.py migrations. Module name project.blog post. Blog post.models import profile. This is in forms, line 1. Helpful automated import. All right, so I'm going to create a super user. Okay, and so I have a super user. I'm also going to go, I need to tell the admin panel about this model that I have. So from .models, import, we'll do profile and blog post. And we'll do the same thing. Admin.site.register, blog post. All right, so from here, I should be able to run the server. go to localhost /blog. Template does not exist. Okay, so my view is working. I need to create this template. So I'm going to go in here and do templates. Blog post. And this one was create. And this is going to take a form. The method will be post. Oops. And then we need a CSRF token. We'll need our actual form. And then the submit button. So input. Okay. So we have, get rid of some of this stuff, settings. Okay, so I'm making a GET request here, and it's returning this form, and the form is the blog post form, which is coming from here. The blog post form, which is based on this model blog post, which has these three fields. And since in the form, I said, I want everything that's in the model to be included in the form, it's including everything, including the author. And by default, it'll be a drop-down menu with all of the users that we have, which is, you know, realistically not what you want for your application, right? But this should work. So I can okay, so it's telling me that the post route didn't return HTTP response, so we have to fix that. But it's basically working. All right. So if this is a post request, we're going to let's see. Let's do form equals blog post form, and we'll populate it with the information from the post request. And then we're going to check if it's valid. And we can call it just form.save. Because we're using the Django model forms instead of just regular forms, we get some shortcuts here. So this should work now. I'm also going to go to the admin. Oops. So I have the blog posts, profiles, users. I'll create another user here. All right, so that created another user. So I'm going to go to the blog, and I can see I have two options now. This other user that I just created. Okay, so this gave me an error because I didn't do that right, but this should still have saved, right? So the request went through, but then I didn't do anything. I should redirect. So and this is just okay. So this is just a shortcut. All right, so right. So now we have a form, we can fill it out, but we probably don't want, realistically, we don't want anyone to be able to just choose a user, right? And then be able to assign, because that's, there's basically no security. Anyone could say a post is written by anyone else. So you can tweak this a little bit to get that, to give you something a little bit more sensible. So rather than including everything here, we're going to be a little bit more specific, and we're going to say title and what was the other one? Text. So let's try that again. This time our form only contains the fields that we tell it to. So we have title and text. And if we submit, then we get a different kind of error, which is an integrity error, not null constraint failed. Any guesses as to what this error means?
So
I think it
that's,
means.
you
Go
got
ahead,
it.
Anthony.
No, you got it. I already did it.
I was going to say that since the form requires basically an author, you have to give it one, so you'd have to tell it that the user is the author.
Yeah. So this author is a foreign key, and by default, this will be a required field. So foreign key would be a required field. So we have to that, but before we had that as a drop down, so user could choose it, but the problem is they could choose any user. Now we've fixed that, security hole, but now we have no way of knowing what user to associate this post with. So what we can do here, Django, again, doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes for us. We actually can have access to the user, the currently logged in user. And right now for me, that is the super user, because I created the super user and I logged into the admin. We'll talk about creating regular users and logging in and logging out later. But for now, let's just assume that the super user that I'm logged in as is just a regular user. So instead of just checking if it's valid and then saving it, what we're going to do is we're going to save, but we're going to not really save. So we're gonna kind of create, we're gonna create a form that's kind of ready to go, but not submitted. So I'm gonna call this save, and then here we're gonna do commit is false. So we're not committing this to the database. We're not saving it. So we're kind of like we're in stasis now. We have all the information. We've kind of like populated this form, but we're gonna stop there for a second. And then what we're gonna do is I'm going to first print. So as we know, we have a whole bunch of stuff on the request object. A lot of that is coming from some of that's coming from the client information, like user agent or all the information from the headers, and then some of it is coming from Django middleware, and a lot of middleware comes pre-installed when you create the app, including some authorization stuff. And this authorization middleware will attach the user to the HTTP request. So we can access that. So request that user. So we'll print this. So we didn't get any error. I mean, we're redirecting to something that doesn't exist, but we didn't get any errors here. Is there going to be a new instance in our database? Yeah, so there's not. So all we have done is basically saved another version of this form. We haven't touched the database yet. And then we printed the request.user, which is just you. So we can use this. So we have our form here, and our form has title and text, which is based on our model. So we have information for title and text. Now we need to like inject the author into this form as well. But we don't want the user. We don't want someone, we don't want the client doing that. So request that user. So new form dot author, so that's the name of the field, equals request dot user. And then we do new form dot save. So let's try that again. So again, redirect error, but that new one got saved. And it's associated with you, not user one, like this other one. So the pattern here is you check if the form is valid, which you always do, and then you save it but commit false, which doesn't really save it. And then you can get information about the user from the request object, and then you can add that information to the form, and then you save it for real, and then carry on. So that's the basic pattern there.
Chad, could you go over one more time what the save is doing if it's not actually saving? Why you need to take that step on line 8?
Yeah, so it's basically it's going to return a new instance of the form. So we can print that out.
Can you modify the original form? Like, is it possible to just do like form instead of new form on line 10? Can you just say form.author and do it directly?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
So on line 10, like if you didn't want to do the new form on line 8, if you just replace new form with form, and so it was form.author equals request.user, do you have to create a new copy of the form, or can you just do it directly to the original?
I haven't actually tried doing that. This is just the way that it's done. But let me try. So let me get this working, and then I'm going to go back and try that. Try it that way. So I'm getting an error here. Open. Blog post has no author. I'm still logged in here. Strange. Okay. Apparently printing this printing this somehow changes it.
I think it's because Django is lazy and doesn't actually save until you try to access it.
That is a good point. Yeah. So this is true for a lot of the database operations, like query sets, things like that. So you can get a query set, but the database the call to the database doesn't actually happen until you try to access the information. So that's probably what's happening here. Maybe I can try afterwards, just out of curiosity. Yeah, so this is the user and then the title, the author and the title. So that's where that is coming from. Let me try not doing this middle business.
Could we see also if you just printed form, how that would look?
Sure.
Also, like new form, like you didn't have an author field in it in the form, so maybe that's why it's giving you the error.
That is a good point. Let me try doing this first. Integrity error. So yeah, so we are not allowed to do that. Let me try going back. Form.save. Yeah, so before we were trying to print, we tried to print it before we were accessing the author. All right, yeah, so let's print form for now. Here's the form itself.
If you just to connect it to something we did the other day, if you if you cleaned that form, it would just give us the author, the text, and the title like as clean
So we could,
values.
yeah, we could access that form that clean data. I'm not sure if that will be, I think it's a string. Yeah, so I guess we could potentially do it that way, where you have forms, clean data. We grab this. And then add an author, add the user. Try that. This is going a little longer than I anticipated, but form.data. And then let's do form. Blog post form. Might have to check if it's valid again, but let me see if this works. Just out of curiosity.
I think
It
that's
seems like you're
what
trying
Stevie
to.
was saying.
Okay.
Yeah, I
It
was
seems
just
like
saying.
you're.
Go ahead.
Okay, it seems like you're trying to access author, which is a property of form, which doesn't exist. Is there any way you can like add it to the form and then make it hidden?
I think you could do something like that. There's actually a couple
Or-
other things that I wanted to
Yeah.
go over, and
Mm.
this is like trying to do this in different ways is interesting, but I think I'm gonna have to time box this. So this is we can talk about that more later or in a breakout room or something. But this is how you this is how you do it. So you'll save the form with commit is being false, and then you add whatever other information, and then you save it again. So that's the basic idea. We can play around with alternative ways of doing that as well. But I wanted to cover the alternative way of doing this. So the first way we have is we have user, and then we have profile. So there's a one-to-one relationship. So we're not really touching the user model. We're leaving the built-in Django user as is. But if you read the documentation, I think this should be fine for any use case that you have for this class. But thinking about doing something long term, it's better to start off by customizing the user model in case there are things that you want to add or change down the road. If you do it this way and you want to change something on the user model, it could get very messy. So to minimize that potential difficulty, you can just right off the bat, instead of having a separate one-to-one relationship, you just will directly subclass the user model. So that's what we're going to do now. So this profile, I'm going to comment this out and delete that. And we're going to make a new model, which is going to be called the same thing, just to make things easier. But we're not going to inherit from models.model. We're going to inherit from abstract user, which is something we get from Django. So from Django.contrib.auth.models import abstract user. And we can check that out as well. So abstract user. That's an abstract base class implementing a fully featured user model with admin compliant permissions. So it's basically, this is how you subclass user in Django. You inherit from abstract user, and it's exactly like user. Abstract user. And if we wanted to add this field, factoid field, you can do that. And that's basically all you have to do is in terms of your model. Let me just add this self that. And we can access by self.username because profile is an abstract user, and abstract user has a username. Are there any questions?
What about that foreign key there?
Foreign key. Oh, thank you. I'll make this profile. Okay, so I am going to start over with database. Let's see, auth user groups.
The stuff I was looking at today was linking it to the user there instead of profile. It would have been user, and I was just getting stuck from there.
You should be able to connect it to user here. Okay. Auth user groups, reverse accessor. Okay. So let me just try changing the related name.
Wouldn't it be more accurate to make that blog posts?
Yeah, so profile blog post, thank you. User permissions. One key.
That last statement, do you have to override the .user underscore permissions with a different related name?
Yeah, I had just done this. I mean, I deleted everything. It's just. All right, so yeah, so sorry, what were you saying?
That last, yeah, the conflict with the
Blog profile.
Oh, but it's happening on multiple attributes of the.
Yeah. Blog post. Is this because it wouldn't be because it's the name of the model. I'm just going to try doing that. Yeah, I think it was because I had the same name. I don't know why, but I had the same name for the app. Not sure. Okay, so now I have to go forms, blog posts. All right, let's try that. Blog post models.py. Oh, admin. Okay, I think this is going to be I'm going to pause here. I don't want to waste everyone's time. So I will figure this out and then I will resume recording. You guys can work on your stuff.
You make me happy that we're not the only ones struggling in this world, though.
Okay, so sorry about that. So the problem was that I had basically overridden the user model, but I didn't tell Django that that's what I had done. And so it was trying to kind of use the built-in user model and mine, and because they're the same, I think they were it was creating this clash. So what you have to do in the settings.py is you have to tell Django that you're going to tell Django which like base user model you're going to use. So in this case, this is the app blog post.profile. So we're telling Django that this is going to be our official user model that we're going to use. And that comes from the profile, which has overridden basically the user, the built-in user. Okay, so I can make migrations. And then I will migrate. All right, and then I'm going to, so there's a couple other things we have to do. I'm going to create a super user as well. So Python, I create super user. Okay, so I have a super user. The next thing that I'm going to have to do is register in we've mentioned the admin, and all we've done so far is just kind of connect up our models. We haven't done any customization, but you can do that. So you can do something like there's admin model. So create a class and let's see. Model admin. And you can actually just not do anything. So we'll do that at first. And this is the model and then the admin class. So You don't need to, memorize this or anything. You can look this up, but so we're basically just because the Django admin is connected to the built-in user model and all this other stuff. If we want to customize how that works, then we have to customize this admin class. So that's one reason why, doing the one-to-one is a little simpler in some ways. But once you get this working, it's, I think it's the recommended way of doing it. All right, so we have the profile. So I'm gonna run the server. Okay, well, that's fine. Username. And we have this factoid. So this factoid field would not be here. So this is not a one-to-one field. This is inside the user model. Now there's a couple of problems here, which we'll deal with in a sec. But this works. Now the password, obviously there's a problem there. But we'll take care of that in a sec. Okay, so this is basically working. Now the issue is that when we're overriding the built-in user, but we need to use a custom. We need to fix the form basically. So I'm going to go here, the URLs. I'm going to create another route. This is more of a preview of what we'll do next week. So feel free to drop out and work on whatever you'd like at this point. So we have a profile form. So let's try just submitting. We'll try using this at first. I'm going to go to the templates. And here. It should be the same basically. And the views. Going to. So I'm basically going to copy all that. So instead of blog post, it's going to be profile form. All right, let's see if that works. Okay. So you get this whole big old mess. And we can try creating a new one. Here's the password. So username. So this submits. But it doesn't actually save. So there's some issues here. So we can't necessarily we could potentially like I could fill out all of everything and that might work. But Django, because this is a common task, also has a built-in kind of pre-made form for us to use. And that form is let's see, from Django.rib.auth. Import user creation form. So there's this user creation form, which is going to handle basically that task that we just had, this mess. So I'm going to instead of doing my own custom thing, I'm going to do this. And now I have something that will should actually work. So form that is valid. Okay. Yeah, so there's an issue with this. I'm gonna go, actually, I'm gonna get the source code, user creation form. Okay. I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna just copy Django code and I'm gonna put this right here. So here is, oops. Here's this user creation form, and I was having a problem with it because I could customize the manager, but I just want to show you this, that you can actually kind of see what this form looks like under the hood. So it should look familiar because we have fields, and then we have, I'm going to get rid of these. I'm going to have to import forms. Let's see. And I'm going to call this I'm gonna have to import some stuff. Let's do this. Might not be import some errors. Django. Give me 1 sec. Password validation. This one is not going to be user, it's going to be profile. Let's see if I can just get rid of that. All right, so let's see if this works here. So my user creation form. So I have this form. So I'm going to do my user creation form, which I'm going to replace here. Oh, I'm not sure why that didn't work.
Don't you have to save it?
Yes, thank you very much. Right, so I had cut that stuff out. So let's see. I wasn't even thinking about the view. Form the form dot save. There we go. I didn't enter the factoid. So if we look at the user doesn't have a factoid, which is this, it's part of our customization. So we can actually add that. If we go to our form, here's where the password1 field, the password2 field, and our meta. Here's where we tell it what fields to use from the model. So I'm going to add, in addition to username, I'm going to add factoid. So now we come back here and we have then we have this new user with this new factoid here that got created. So it can get kind of complicated and messy, but you basically have two alternatives if you want to use the built-in user model, and you basically do want to do that. You can either create a one-to-one field, which will work. And if that's what you want to do, that is absolutely fine. The maybe more robust long-term way is to override the user or to subclass the user using abstract user, and then you'll have to add this in your settings and maybe do a couple other things, but that's basically how it works. So if that, if that's not crystal clear immediately, don't worry about it. Any questions? Are there any questions that didn't get answered?
What went wrong earlier? I was away when you first started.
Yeah. So what went wrong earlier was that I forgot to include this in the settings. So if you change the default model, so instead of just using user, the built-in user. I'm using something custom. I didn't include this, so I didn't tell Django that I was now using a different user model. So it's trying to kind of do both at the same time. And there was a naming conflict.
Is this a per app piece, like the profile? Or can you do it project wide, I would guess, as well? So all the apps?
Well, yeah, so you would, we'll get to this next week, but you'll want to handle all of like your login, log out, sign up stuff in basically in its own app. So that app will handle it for everything else. So you don't have to do this in every app. No, you should just do it once. Okay.